Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and as we start to get ready for the inquiry into the coronavirus pandemic response, which the government will be desperate to commandeer, Dominic Cummings will be appearing before MPs and is eager to do so. But will his testimony be believed, and will it have any impact? But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, there were a number of people instrumental in the government's decisions last year concerning our coronavirus response. In terms of how I've seen the key moments last year, there are, I think I would say, probably about 10 key points. Note, I'm not going to mention anything that was only known in hindsight. There were things we genuinely learnt, there were other things we knew from the start and the government just pretended that they didn't. First point, we locked down too late in the first wave. All very well Boris Johnson admitting that now but saying he received poor advice. We know he did not. He ignored the advice to lock down by 2 full weeks. Secondly, we did not apply immigration restrictions. We had completely open ports and airports. We're an island, should have been easy. We had no requirement for testing or quarantine. This is still essentially the case now. We've got a few little provisos, but largely they're not in place a full year later. 3, we initially adopted a test and trace strategy, and that was fine. But then this was abandoned, and when the government tried to re-implement it later, when it was already out of hand, they used a lot of private companies with no links to healthcare services. And obviously when you've got lots of different companies all trying to link together, you get a bit of chaos when we could have had the NHS taking care of the whole thing. 4, PPE procurement was carried out too late and billions was given to private companies. Again, I mean, many of whom had only just been set up to get these contracts. These companies did not exist before this time, dodgy in itself. And again, many of them largely had nothing to do with PPE procurement. This led to massive wastage of public money and not a lot of usable PPE in return. 5, the furlough scheme. Although leaving out millions of people unfairly, it's definitely got its gaps, it's definitely got its downsides, nonetheless did save millions of jobs. This represented the only successful pandemic response of 2020 for the government and was based on good old-fashioned socialism in the form of using public money to support those most in need. Granted, much of this money was also used by those who didn't need it as well. But you know, these are Conservatives, we can't expect too much. 6, we refused to implement advised safety procedures in schools and then opened them up without phasing it in as well. Hence the second lockdown blew up. Or the second wave, sorry. Then 7, the lockdown, second lockdown. We locked down for the second time too late, far too late in fact, and a long time after it was advised. 8, the government kept bringing out coronavirus legislation throughout the year, just a few hours, sometimes even just a few minutes before new laws came into force. This made for a confusing situation where even police weren't sure what the law was at times. 9, the government completely flushed away public support by backing people who clearly broke the rules if they were close to ministers, or even were ministers. Obviously Barnard's Castle being the most famous, but not the only example. And 10, a win for the government, although this technically was in 2021, they made the decision to get the NHS to take charge of the vaccinations. This has been one of only 2 successes in the government's response and is down to, wait for it, socialist policies. So essentially 2 good decisions and a whole host of bad ones. And the bad decisions will not be swept under the carpet during the inquiry. This means that the battle for everyone involved is not hiding the bad decisions. They will try with some of them, but there's no real way to do that. But they'll have to make sure some other bugger takes the blame. That's what it's now, a blame game. Now, there are multiple players in this drama. The senior scientific advisors, Boris Johnson, Dominic Cummings, senior officials, senior ministers, as well as a few others. But this is an incredibly complex subject and will crop up again and again throughout the year as inquiries take place. For now, I want to focus on the battle between Boris Johnson and Dominic Cummings. Dominic Cummings, like Nigel Farage, isn't he? He's the bad penny who keeps turning up. And this is a battle because Dominic Cummings has not left quietly. This is not the first time MPs have demanded that he face them for questions. But when it was over Brexit, he refused to do so and was found in contempt of Parliament, although nothing happened. Frankly, he should have been detained. the last time he entered the Palace of Westminster. That's actually supposed to be the procedure. If you're in contempt of Parliament and you enter Parliament, you're arrested. But this time he is going to appear before them. And he's not been forced. He's doing it willingly. Of course he is. He wants to come out of this with some credibility left. In fact, knowing his arrogance, he'll want to heighten his credibility. And he will do this by pinning the blame on Johnson. He has made a career out of pretending to be this great visionary. So he will be the one who will be stating, if only we'd have done what I said. Yes, I made the odd mistake, but I learned quickly. If we'd have just followed my advice, then it would have all been fantastic. We might have had a shaky start, but it have all come good in the end. In fact, he has to. Everyone knows that Dominic Cummings was instrumental in steering the initial coronavirus policies. And it's with this in mind that I was reading a report recently in The Times. Now, it's interesting to see what a newspaper can do when it wants to report in a balanced, meaningful way. It's a Conservative supporting paper, but with no particular love for either Boris Johnson or Dominic Cummings. So, of course, when they report on a fracas between the two, it comes out reasonably balanced. And the article gives the initial views of Cummings and his supporters and then the counter views of Johnson's supporters. And it focuses on the second lockdown, because this is what Dominic Cummings wants to do. Naturally, neither Johnson nor Cummings are going to be able to claim that they had the first wave right. Their line there is that they did their best in a new situation and decisions were incorrect, but it wasn't really, they were basing it from people who weren't quite right. Blame the scientists is what they'll do. Obviously, it's nonsense, but enough of the public will probably believe that, quite frankly, unless the media shine a spotlight, which I don't expect them to. But the second wave is different. Cummings is claiming that he tried to persuade Johnson to initiate the lockdown in September. He's trying to claim that he learned lessons. He says that he pushed this very hard over a period of time. He also says that Johnson refused due to a combination of fears for the economy and resistance from Tory MPs. Now, before I go to the counter argument for this, I'm going to pick on those two things. So, one, the damage to the economy. Now, possible, here's the thing though. Johnson was advised to lock down for 2 weeks. He will also have been told that if you lock down later, you do so for longer. I mean, we, the public, were being told that. Johnson was absolutely being told that. So, we could say he may not have believed them, but the proof was in the first lockdown, which was implemented too late. It lasted for longer than in comparable countries who did so earlier in their cycle. Besides, there's the time to consider. So if you're going to shut down shops, even if you think you'll only have to shut it down for the same amount of time, when is it better to do so? September or November? September, obviously. Otherwise, you're hitting the attempted Christmas ramp up in trade. So although it's entirely possible that Johnson did worry about the impact on the economy and was just too stupid to see that his actions would actually hurt the economy even more, I'm not sure about that claim, because you'd have to believe that the Prime Minister is actually really stupid. Although I say he does stupid things at times. I mean, I don't think he's that clever, but I also don't think he's actually a moron, even when he does moronic things. The second thing is the idea of pressure from Tory MPs, another matter. Now, they have constantly resisted restrictions and continue to do so. In fact, Johnson has sometimes only been able to proceed with his restrictions with Labour votes. On at least one occasion I can think of, he relied upon Labour votes. And I've often felt that Johnson only acted when the situation was so bad that the rebellion in his own party whittled down to nominal. This motivation I absolutely believe, because it has seemed apparent without the need to be told by someone close to operations. See, if you act before it's obvious to people who don't understand the situation, they will resist, including Tory MPs. So, yes, it makes sense that he had to wait until it was undeniable. But here's the thing. Do we believe that Dominic Cummings was pushing very hard for a second lockdown in September? Because the counter-argument from Johnson supporters in this article is that Cummings was barely involved in pandemic policy decisions after the Barnard Castle affair. I don't believe this. Dominic Cummings was clearly very close to the Prime Minister throughout most of 2020. In fact, if Cummings genuinely was kept out of decision-making after last spring, what on earth was that bust up in autumn all about? Now, this will not be quite true. Until that blow-up, Cummings was obviously close to Johnson. He worked at 10 Downing Street, and he was obviously close to the decision-making process as well. I can believe that he wasn't always getting his way towards the end, hence the likely explanation for the bust-up, but he will absolutely have still been the one whispering in Johnson's ear, and certainly after September. Here's the thing, the Barnard's Castle affair, Boris Johnson threw away so much political credibility on defending Dominic Cummings. He didn't do that and then immediately say, right, Dom, you'd better stay a bit out of the decision-making process. He did that because he desperately wanted to keep Dominic Cummings close to him. Really as simple as that. Otherwise, he'd have let him go and he could still have been working remotely on various projects, but he wouldn't have had that close contact with the decision-making process. So to me, it's a lie. But why tell this lie? Why not just say that Cummings was not arguing strongly for a September lockdown at all? Why not just say that? Why not say, oh, of course he would say that, he wants to get out the blame. It'd be quite easy to do. People would believe it. Cummings is a liar. Johnson is a liar as well, but so is Cummings. But even if he wasn't quite as close to the decision-making in September as he was in, say, March and April, which I find difficult to believe, why try and push the idea that he was barely involved at all? Is it because maybe he genuinely was arguing in favour of the lockdown in September? Because one thing is for certain, wherever there is no hard evidence to the contrary, Dominic Cummings will absolutely try to claim that he argued for the correct decisions at every turn. He will absolutely rewrite his own personal history based on hindsight. This is the man who came back from that Durham visit to edit a blog to try and claim he'd foreseen the coronavirus pandemic earlier in 2019. Needless to say, he was caught out, which will be quite easy to use against his credibility. Will that affect his credibility when it comes to his testimony? Because it's quite easy to attack him for that. We know that Dominic Cummings tries to rewrite history to make out that he's cleverer than he really is. Or will Cummings have enough evidence to damage Johnson out of spite? Because people may not believe Dominic Cummings based on what he says, but has he got any evidence to present? We'll be finding out this summer. But those are my initial thoughts. I think this is definitely going to be a topic that will run throughout the year. We have made a mess of things. And so the key political battles will be over blame. So I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.